Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Maybe you're watching it in the evening, I'm not sure. That's okay, either way. Any one of those ways is fine with me. We had our Napoleon quiz. We're going to move on from him. This is a couple of things that we will sort of do to wrap up the French Revolution and the time of Napoleon, even though obviously we're going to revisit him in our comparisons with Hitler, which will begin, our discussion about him will begin tomorrow. So today I'm going to kind of do two wit-ups. I'm going to do one here, and then we'll do one live. And so the first one is this one, and the second one, live one, will be this one. This one is shorter. Okay, all right, here we go. Let's do this one first. Okay, this was famous, for lack of a better way of putting it. This was a famous peace treaty that was done. If you recall, the Battle of Waterloo was in 1815, and what we basically say about this particular event is that this Congress, was the peace treaty after the Napoleonic Wars. This is to try to restore peace. Now, you remember the Napoleonic Wars? We basically list that as about a 16-year-long event. Really, Napoleon and France was constantly at war. They were constantly at each. He was either on the attack or on the defense, or trying to do this or trying to do that. Ever since he came to power, really to begin with in 1799, but as he became emperor, when he became emperor, of course, of France in 1804, they are constantly at war, and so we call this Napoleonic Wars. And I gave you some numbers of, the amount of people killed during the time period. Okay, so the Battle of Waterloo is officially over. So Vienna. Okay, what's Vienna? Is a city. I'm sure you've heard of it. Vienna is a very famous city. It's the capital city of Austria. Was at that time, still is today. By all accounts, a very beautiful, really sort of Central European country. Okay. This Congress was run by a man named Metternich. And he was a prince of Austria, and his name was Clemens von Metternich. And one of the reasons why I make an issue of this is I want to bring up something, and it's this right here, VON. Okay, whenever you see a VON, all right, what you're basically seeing is an indication that the German-speaking people of Austria, of Germany, these Prussians, if you will, as well, this is an indication of nobility. So whenever you see von Metternich, for example, you'll see there's a guy named Hindenburg. That's the most recognizable name you may from this time. Anyway, his real name was von Hindenburg. There was a famous German general named von Ludendorff in World War I. So anytime you see this is an example of nobility of German-speaking people. One of the things I would note is, going forward, just FYI, what's Hitler's name? Is his name Adolf von Hitler? No. And that's going to be an issue we will see as we get into World War II. Here you have Hitler as the leader of the nation of Germany, but all of his generals have VON in front of their name. And this tension between the noblemen, generals, and the upstart peasant Hitler is going to be something that will be very interesting as World War II goes along. Okay, so Clemens von Metternich, a prince. What are they trying to do here? Well, one of the things I've sort of made the issue about is that one of the paradoxes of Napoleon is he ends up being, he loves France. He ends up loving France, and he convinces the people of France to love it as much as he does. And what I called this was nationalism. Sometimes you'll hear the term patriotism here. Okay, well, these nobles who are going to be running this Congress of Vienna, they don't like this, all right, because this nationalism business gives motivation and gives hope and gives feelings to the lower class people that they don't want those lower class people to have. They want lower class people to just be calm, do what they're supposed to do, and not cause any trouble to the nobility. Okay? Napoleon caused trouble to the nobility is the way these guys are looking at it. So now, what does this mean? This means that the theme is going to be, we're going to limit the individual rights of the lower and middle class. We're going to end this extreme loyalty to one's nation. We don't want that stuff going on. We don't want to have that. We don't, they're basically, one of the big things here is that we don't want war. War is destructive of property. Well, this is one of the themes of history, is war is destructive of property. Well, these nobles, they're the property owners. Look what happened to the nobility of the aristocrats of France. They had their lands destroyed. They had their lands confiscated. That upsets the amount of wealth a nobleman, an aristocrat has. So we don't want those kinds of things. These are the kinds of things that are going to be emphasized at the Congress. And basically what happened is that all these nations, remember, one of the key things I want to make sure you always remember about Napoleon is that he is defeated by an alliance of nations. And this is a very important part of this story in the beginning of this course. And again, he is defeated by an alliance. France is defeated by an alliance. All right, so all of the nations that beat France, that came together, look, in the Battle of Napoleon, the Battle of Waterloo, mostly Napoleon was engaged with the British army. There were Austrians there, but it was the Prussians who came over the hill sort of at the end that really sort of took the day. So the British obviously were there, the Austrians were there, the Prussians were there, the Russians were there, the Tsar of Russia came. To the Congress of Vienna is what I'm referring to. Even the Swedes were there. Okay, every nation that might have had something to do or had been invaded by France was invited. Now here's something very interesting as well, is that France was also invited. This is very interesting and unique in world history. Here's the loser of this war. They're invited. Typically, losers got dictated to what was going to happen. Okay, what are some of the goals of the Congress? Well, one of the goals is to redraw the map. Obviously, we did a map, right? The map of Europe has been turned upside down, hasn't it? And now it's going to be the job of these. Nobles to reconstruct the map of Europe. And when they go about doing that, they want to make sure that once the map is restored, and we're going to talk about how they do that here in just a second, what their sort of background, their backdrop of how they'll do it. Once it's all said and done, who are we going to put back in place? We're going to put nobility, people of nobility back in leadership roles. They're going to do this in France. There's going to be a guy named Louis XVIII who's going to be sort of put into place even in France. A guy who survived the French Revolution. So we're going back, this is going backwards, if you will. Alrighty? They want to create a balance of power among the nations of Europe. Now, this is sort of interesting. How do you create a balance of power in Europe? Well, one of the things you do is you redo the map. So, yeah, the map is set up so all these nations have a similar geographic size. They have a similar, therefore, population of people. And they, by decision, all decide to have the same size of military. They're all going to make their militaries look equal in size. Okay? And so the idea is that if everybody is equal, if there is a balance, there's not going to be one nation, all right? There's not going to be one nation or person. That's an important part of this story, isn't it? Because the argument that they made is, you know, France never would have done this if it wasn't for one person grabbing power or assuming power, all this kind of stuff. All right? So this is the goal. These are the goals of the Congress. Okay, so draw a line across there. That's why that's there. All right? Now, something very interesting happened, and that was that all these guys had been... really, and if again you look at my dates here, you can see 1814 to 1815. Okay, so you may realize here that there's something that is in the middle of that. Something happened in the middle of that, didn't it? Okay, can you recall what I'm talking about here? Well, I think so, because of course Napoleon was originally captured. Remember that picture I showed you of captured Napoleon? He was originally captured in 1814, and he went to Elba. Remember, he went to Elba for almost a year. Well, in March of 1815, Napoleon escaped from Elba. All right, and if you recall, basically he is the emperor again for what they called 100 days. Okay, and so what we say is that the Congress was interrupted between Napoleon's escape from Elba and his defeat at Waterloo, the 100 days. All right, so you have to kind of imagine, look, these guys are all in Austria, they're all sitting around some big conference room probably, in some sort of nice castle of some sort or something like that, and suddenly somebody comes rushing in with a message, Napoleon has escaped, and they all go, oh goodness. And they all have to leave, and they all have to go back to their respective countries and get, reassert their size of their armies to deal with him one more time. Alrighty, and so that's, I think that would have been very interesting to see how that would have, what that would have been like at that particular day when the message arrived. Napoleon has escaped. All right, so what's the importance of the Congress of Vienna? Well, the importance is that if you think about what the French Revolution was attempting to do, and I think there's an argument here about does the French Revolution accomplish it, and even you could make the argument about the Code Napoleon. These things are about bringing rights for everyone of all levels, for lower and middle class people, for them having the same rights as the nobility, equal rights across the board, no privileges anymore. Those kinds of things are what the French Revolution was about, and those kinds of things are what the Code Napoleon was about. And again, that's one of the things what Napoleon said. He believed he was a product of the revolution. Well, you can see here that if the Congress of Vienna is going to put all of the nobility and the aristocrats back in charge, what's going to happen to all those attempts to make to eliminate the privileges of the aristocrat? Well, that's not going to happen. The aristocrats are going to maintain. Okay, they're going to maintain those privileges. What's going to happen to the desire for rights for the regular folks? Well, those are going to be put on hold. Those are going to be brought to a halt, and anything that was won in the French Revolution is going to be taken away. Okay? Here's one of the things that I would sort of say is sort of interesting, and going back to the point I made a moment ago about France being invited. Okay? France being invited was a big deal. France was not punished for the acts of Napoleon. So therefore, France and the people of France did not feel punished. They did not feel like they were singled out and hammered for what Napoleon had done. And the idea is that if we do this, all right, France will it won't rise again. How's that sound? Okay? And look, I would say you would probably have to judge any peace treaty that you would look at, you should judge it based on, does it keep the peace? Well, I think there's an argument to be made that the Congress of Vienna, whether you like it or not, and there's a lot to dislike, I think most free people would say there's a lot to dislike about the Congress of Vienna. But the fact of the matter is, peace was maintained for 40 years, and that was really sort of a border war, okay? Again, between the French and the Germans, to be honest with you. But really, there's no large-scale, continent-wide conflict for a long time. How long, you may ask? It's a long time. So really, so here we go, 1815, peace is really kept in Europe for 99 years. And again, this is an interesting debate. Is that a great accomplishment or not? Well, you can make the argument, well, it's a great accomplishment because it kept the peace. Okay, that's a great accomplishment. Well, It's bad because, well, again, what are we talking about here? Well, individual rights are suppressed, you can make the argument, for 99 more years. So these types of debates are always, of course, as I always say, interesting and of note, and certainly worthy to be discussed all the time. Okay, so that is the Congress of Vienna. When we meet today, when we meet after this, we'll do a what called the 4 ironies of the French Revolution. This is a super short one as well. Okay, so this was Congress of Vienna was short. This one will be short, and I will see you 99 years, and I will see you next time. Thank you very much. Aloha. Good job.